Green Architecture, welcome to November 10th, and we are talking house styles, otherwise known as architectural styles today. Kind of an interesting PowerPoint that I think will open your eyes to some of the housing styles that we see in our area, and also some that maybe aren't in this area but are pretty neat, pretty unique in their own sense. So, as you work through this, I would ask you to take some notes in your notebook about the different styles, and then you'll be completing the activity 2.7 House Styles Study Guide as your assignment for this. I expect it will take today and a portion of tomorrow to finish this up, and you can anticipate a quiz on this later in the week, probably Friday of this week. So here we go. We're going to look at house styles today. So if you want to get ready to take some notes, that would be fantastic. So we are talking, and I'm going to get my picture out of the way here. I think might be the best. All right, so we're talking house styles for green architecture. There are many in the United States, and they range from some you're going to say are very familiar to you, others you've never heard of before. Some of those might be Adobe, Cape Cod, Colonial, Country, which I oftentimes refer to as American Farmhouse, Log, Mediterranean, Modern, Ranch, and Saltbox. So, what is a green home? And we've been talking more and more about housing and the whole green idea. So, a green home really it minimizes the environmental impact while maximizing design, energy, material, resource efficiency. We want healthier, more resource efficient, resource friendly um, homes in the process of building and constructing them, as well as the remodeling, the operation, and the maintenance. And then once we commit to a green home, you're committing to a higher quality of life for you, your family, your community, and the world. So, our first style, and I would like you to do is take some notes as we work through this. The first one is referred to as an adobe. Um, Perhaps you think of this as they show here, maybe the southwestern U.S. Perhaps you visited some family down in Arizona, New Mexico, Southern California. Um, some Spanish-speaking countries also utilize homes like this. It's made of tightly compacted earth or clay, sometimes referred to as adobe. Okay, so some of the characteristics, and these are the things that I'd like you to be writing down as we go through, and I've tried to help you with this by highlighting a few items that are of maybe highest importance here. But for example, the adobe is a building material, like we said, it's tightly compacted earth, clay, perhaps some straw or grass mixed into it, shaped into bricks, influenced by early Pueblo, kind of that southwestern United States Native Americans. Typically have a flat roof. We don't have to worry about snow load like we have in this area, so flat roofs work just fine down there. Walls are typically made of adobe, like we had said, or sometimes stucco. Some of these homes, they've modernized them. The wall panels are made out of a styrofoam material, almost like a, oh, what do we call that? A ICF, right? The insulated concrete forms. We might have that, and then they put some stucco, which is kind of a concrete material that's spread over the outside of it to make it very durable. Oftentimes, you'll see that there are heavy timbers that stick out. If you can kind of envision these little dark spots here, there's a little heavy timbers that stick out from the edges. Perhaps the roofs are built on that. Oftentimes, have arched doorways. Red roof tiles. You can kind of see the red roof tiles in the example here. I don't think we have great ideas of the arched doorways, but pretty common in this type of architecture. Oftentimes have the decorative railings, maybe tiles for courtyards and things like that. Another style, Cape Cod. Actually, my favorite type of architecture. The house that I live in, the one that my wife and I own, is a Cape Cod. I just really like the look of it. Ours has these little dormer windows, as we call them. It's a very symmetrical look, which means it's balanced from side to side. Now, forget about the garage here, but just focus on the house. It's very symmetrical. Center doors, and then it almost mirrors itself on side to side. So Cape Cod, um, we say it's a pitched gable roof. I'll go one step further, say it's a high pitched. Okay, we talk about pitch. It's this angle. This is high pitch. This is kind of low pitch, if you think about it like that. And the higher the pitch, the less that snow and rain and water can cling to the roof. So that higher pitched roof is very common. Oftentimes, what we say is 1.5 stories tall. You can kind of see in the picture here. There's one story down here, but we're kind of limited up here. It's not a full boxy upstairs, so it's kind of a half story up there, it's referred to as. Oftentimes have dormer windows. I pointed that out earlier, but that's these little windows that look like they stick out of the roof line. Very symmetrical design. I think I mentioned that already. If you figure the center line, it's the same over here as it is over here on the left. Okay. Bedrooms upstairs. Mine is very true to form on this. I have two bedrooms in the upstairs and a bathroom, and that's about all that's up there. Main floor, you'd have your living room, um, your kitchen, dining areas, open and easy for entertainment. Mine is set up much like that. You come into my front door, and it's a big open area of a family room to the right and a living room to the left. I'm sorry, a dining room to the left. Usually has one or two fireplaces. Bricks and stone are the most common material for that. That's our Cape Cod. Again, very popular across the United States. Initially, Cape Cod was very popular in the northeast part of the United States, where we have the big nor'easter storms. Nor'easters, they call them, when the northeast winds blow in off the ocean, the heavy rains and snows and things like that. Our next one is a colonial. Okay, it looks like to me, I think that looks like a grown-up version of the Cape Cod. Okay, usually a very big, kind of a stately looking house, if you will. Early American settlers used those. Again, symmetrical in design. If I was to draw a line right down the middle, it's the same on the right as it is on the left. They have multi-paned windows. If we go back up one, see if I can do that. Yeah. See how these windows have these little panes, these little panes of glass? That's what we mean by multi-paned windows. Classic details. Oftentimes we'll have that little porch with columns in the front, kind of the classic look for old style houses, influenced by the early Dutch and English and French architecture. Very welcoming center hall. If you walk into a house like this, oftentimes it has a big open area, kind of a center hallway. Two-story, very common. A full two stories. You have one here and one up there. Now, there's a number of these in Waseca if you take a look around. Front door has side windows. Again, I'll go up a level, but if you look at your front door, a lot of times there's side windows here and here to give it some unique character and detail. Typically, living room on one side of the center hall, dining room on the other side of that center hall. Kitchen is oftentimes in the back. Maybe it's our service area. Perhaps your garage, your parking area is back there, so it makes it easy access for a kitchen or a service area. Very family friendly design, very open feel for your living areas, and of course your bedrooms, most commonly upstairs in a house like this. It could have dormers or it could have columns. Those are pretty popular with a big colonial house, as you see here. The next one is a country. I like to call that an American farmhouse style. American farmhouse, kind of a hybrid of many different styles together. But if you think of these, if you think of a farm, oftentimes they have a porch or a railing as an extension of the house. So if you come in from working, there's oftentimes benches there. You can sit down, take off your heavy work clothes, your work boots, and things like that, and leave them outside. These were adapted by Americans and very square, very boxy by nature. These houses are often added on. Farmers, of course, are busy in the spring and the summer and the fall. Sometimes in the middle of summer, there's not a lot going on, so that's when they could add on as they needed to. So they would adapt it to what their needs were. Kind of simple structures, very square by nature, nothing very extravagant in the look, but yeah, unique house in its own sense. Oftentimes has symmetrical lines. Again, you see the center line, and it's kind of mirrored on both sides, often the case. A central door for the entrance. Evenly placed windows are very common. One or often two stories. Has a front or even a wraparound porch. So you see the big porch on this one, kind of wraps around. Has the gabled roof lines. Gabled are the single peak like this. You have a gable here, here, kind of that classic looking roof, influenced by early European cottages. I think part of the country or American farmhouse that makes it so popular nowadays is the nostalgia. How many of us don't remember going to grandparents' house and the good memories that we have of going there? And oftentimes grandparents, older generations lived on farms, and so we have those fond memories, and that's kind of brought a revival of this house style. People will build them even right here in town. I think I'll show you an example later of a American farmhouse or a country style house right here in Waseca, not far from the high school, in fact. We have earth sheltered homes as well. Basically, what we're saying, it is a house that is the earth or the dirt buried around it on the top and on the sides. And really, all you see is this one side that's open. And most commonly, as we talked of last week with building green concepts, we might orient that in such a way that we take advantage of solar orientation. So we might have that set up so we orient that so our windows and doors can collect the solar warmth and light. Okay, so some examples or characteristics of an earth sheltered home. The structure has soil against the walls, the roof, or sometimes even entirely buried underground with just an access way or a door. Doors and windows are typically facing south, as we said already. That ties into the solar orientation that we learned about back last week in building green. And Earth acts as a thermal mass. If you remember, we talked briefly about geothermal, and geothermal takes advantage of the warmth of the Earth. So the Earth typically is 55 degrees when you dig down a little ways. So now our house is insulated by dirt that's already at 55 degrees. So we don't have to heat it too far up, or we don't have to cool it much more. So it kind of helps us with both of those. Promotes that cost-effective heating and cooling of the house. The geodesic, sometimes called the geodesic dome house. It has that geometric shape to it, kind of the pentagon look to it with triangular pieces to conform and make that very solid, very strong house, very weather, wind resistant, if you will. Not many corners, if you think of that one. It's almost round by nature, so kind of unique that has a round exterior. Interior may have many angles, but not really much for corners per se. It's known for conserving building materials and conserving energy for heating and cooling. If you can envision the inside of this, kind of the rounded ceilings, it helps the flow of the air, both heating and cooling, to make it more efficient to heat and cool. It's very strong in structure due to the equilateral triangular shapes that are used to build it. We mentioned that a little bit here. We have a pentagon that's made of several equilateral triangles that give it a very strong structure, very solid, so it stands up to weather, wind, and storms very well. Um, we think about the dome shape, and it amplifies light and sound. So we have maybe a cupola, as we call it up here, letting light come in to kind of spread light throughout the entire house as it's evenly displayed through this entry up at the top, that cupola. An example, if you've ever been to Epcot Center in Disney, that's an example of a geodesic dome type of a structure. Not the most common anymore. I had a college instructor who had a geodesic dome, very energy efficient, a unique home in its own way. Log homes. We talk about log homes. As you think of the old traditional settlers, what would they do? They would take advantage of the materials that were there. They would cut down trees and then stack them up in that configuration to make a log home. So our earliest log homes were built in the United States from early settlers. influenced by Swedish settlers, some of the first to try and take advantage of the using of the land that way. Use where timber was easily found. We like to take advantage of the things that are around us so we don't have to carry or transport things as far. Use where timber was easily found. So you think up north Minnesota where there's a lot of trees, well, it just makes sense to have log homes up there because there's a lot of trees readily available. They can be made with no nails because they can just chisel them out with a axe or a saw and let them stack up one on top of another. Perhaps you remember the toys. Some of you may have had them in your younger years, Lincoln logs. So they kind of notch together and they stack nicely together. Very sturdy because of the way the corners lock together. Rain proof because we've sealed them up on the inside, referred to as chinking. When they put the two logs together, they smear like a concrete or a mud or a mortar mixture along where the logs are to make sure they don't leak at all. American log cabin was influenced by the Homestead Act of 1862. It's oversized porches in a lot of cases, large picturesque windows. Now, that's kind of the extreme. I think of a log cabin, sometimes I think of an up north cabin. Maybe it doesn't have to be as grand as this one is. These look pretty nice, pretty grand, but a simpler log cabin may not have all of that going on with it. The Mediterranean style kind of reminds me of the adobe style a little bit because we have some similar roofs, we have some rounded archways and so on. Um, it's from the, I guess we say the Moorish or the Byzantine, influenced by the Spanish. Usually in the warmer climates, not so much in our area here in northern hemisphere of Minnesota where it's cold. Again, that stucco exterior. Stucco would be that concrete material that's kind of spread over the edge, the surface of the outside of the house, and it could be blocks or bricks. It could even be like the one video we saw last week of a house made of hay bales, and they could smear stucco over the side of that, so you could kind of accomplish it with that as well. It has a shallow, I guess, a shallow pitch. Remember we talked about pitch on the roof had to do with a peak. Okay, so rather than being a high peak like a Cape Cod, it would be a more shallow peak like that. Okay, so a shallow peak roof again. They don't have to worry about snow load like we have to in Minnesota, so they can get by with that a little easier. Wide overhangs. If you look at the wide overhangs on the house here, um, idea of that is to keep the sun out because these are used in more sunny, warm environments. So a little more intense sun with a wider overhang helps shade the windows a little bit better. It has large windows again to let the light in, yet that's why we put the wide overhangs on to protect and shade some of that a little bit. Courtyards are very common with this, kind of a backyard or a tiled area, maybe in the middle of the home where it's no roof over the top. Oftentimes open arches like you see in this example, open archways for your entries, and they tie that into the windows as well. Exposed wooden beams are common, so again, ties in closely with that adobe style that we looked at first as we were moving through these. American interpretation echoes the relaxed and the outdoor lives of the Mediterranean. Again, maybe not so popular here because of the nature of how it's built, but a very beautiful house in its own sense. A modern house. I know that there is at least one or two of these here in town, and I think I'll show you an example. Modern house known for things like very clean lines, nice and square, straightforward looking, simple proportions, very boxy by nature for the most part. Kind of an open floor plan when you go in. So there's not a lot of little rooms, but very open. Maybe your living room, your family room, your dining room, your kitchen might be one big open room. Lots of natural light. If you look at the example here, lots of natural light by the big windows that we have to let that natural light flow in. Lots of glass kind of ties into that very, very well. Also, very flat or shallow pitched roofs. Sometimes it might be just sloped in one direction, but more commonly you see these as a more of a flat roof. Important connections to the outdoor space. They're trying to, I guess, make a backyard so it flows easily and nicely from the living or the family room right out into the backyard. Minimal furnishings and sometimes some decorative or ornamented walls. Okay. All right, another one we call is a ranch, sometimes known also as a rambler. Ranch or a rambler are kind of common terms there thrown together. Developed in the late 1920s, early 1930s, inspired by early Californian ranchos. Okay, dominated in the 1950s and 60s. You'll see a lot of these in Waseca. One story, that's the big thing that sticks out in my mind with a ranch or a rambler. It's a one-story house. Okay, typically you just have the main level. There is no upstairs, probably just an attic for storage, but it's all just a one-level house. And then, of course, a basement in our area, especially. Very simple, very boxy, very simple style of a house. Living and dining areas are oftentimes combined. Could be rectangular, as you see in the picture here. Sometimes they're even U or L shaped. Oftentimes sliding patio doors that go out into a backyard. I would guess several of you perhaps live in a ranch or sometimes called a rambler home. Salt box, kind of a classic look from the front. It might remind you a bit of a colonial because it's got the decorative front door, very symmetrical, high-pitched roof, and then it slopes at an angle in the back. That roof line alone really is the thing that makes a salt box house stand out amongst the rest. So similar to colonial, symmetrical, multi-pane windows. So again, some very common similarities between the two. A central front entry. The unique roof. Again, that's the very unique thing about this. Shorter in the front, and then the two-story section, it's elongated down towards the rear, so it looks like a one-story. So back from here, probably looks like a one-story house. Up here looks like a two-story. So a short, steep roof here and a long, maybe even a flatter angled roof in the back. That's our salt box style of a house. Tudor. Okay, our Tudor house. The easiest way for me to recognize a Tudor style of a house has these wooden beams, kind of these crosshatch patterns that's in what we call the gable peaks on that. I know there are a couple of those around Waseca as well. So inspired by medieval cottages, kind of has that medieval look with that type of a roof line in the gables. Typically 1.5 or even 2 stories. The upper floors have sided and they're cladding, so sometimes we refer to this as the cladding. Dark beams over a whitewashed plaster, very common, so we can kind of see the beams exposed, and then we've got the whitewashed plaster underneath it. Patterned stone or brick chimney is very common. Tall, narrow, multi-pane windows. If we look at that, they have kind of tall windows. I don't see the multi-pane here so much, but usually a very tall window is common with them. Rounded doorways. Look at the entryway, how it's kind of rounded. Even our front windows are kind of rounded in there. Common look with that. Might even have a bay window. I don't think this particular one has that, but a window that protrudes out into the yard a little bit. Large entryways and living areas, oftentimes known for their high ceilings, and then the steep pitched roofs. Again, if you look at the angle of the roofs, they're quite steep. You start comparing that to the modern or the rambler or the ranch, much steeper roof line. So very common there is the steep pitched roof, but especially is these dark beams over whitewashed plaster. That's the most common way to identify a Tudor. Victorian sometimes makes me think of a dollhouse. Okay, Victorian, very beautiful house. A lot of times they get used for B&B, known as a bed and breakfast place. You might stay overnight, get a nice meal, and a comfy old house, things like that. There are several of these around Waseca. Oftentimes the outsides are painted bright, the exterior is painted very bright, covered or wraparound front porch. If you look at the wraparound porch here, kind of a nice entryway, that wraparound porch. Detailed ornamental elements are oftentimes common with a Victorian. Turn posts, spindles, brackets. Look at this. We have a lot of these spindles in here that really make it kind of decorative, kind of ornate, if you will. Gingerbread decorating kind of has that gingerbread house look to it. I think dollhouse as well kind of gives that same feel. The wide veranda, they're talking about this piece right here. They call that a veranda. Turrets and grand towers. Again, we might look at This guy up here, it has a tower or a turret that sometimes protrudes up higher than the rest of the roof. Asymmetrical. In other words, there isn't a lot of balance here, is there? You have this high peaked roof here, and it's kind of the turret or the cupola here. Irregular roof lines, excuse me, gables that face several different directions. So a very decorative, very unique house, very beautiful, well known, and you see a lot of those in our area. All right, let's see how well we can identify these. See if we can identify the styles of the homes in the next slides. Okay, several are from right here in Waseca. Let's see how well you can do. What is that particular home? Hint, hint, it's Mr. Kuschel's favorite house. See if you can remember what kind of house that was. Number 2, what style of a house is that? Again, known for single story, very simple, very boxy. What kind of house is that? We just got done talking about this. This one is actually right here in Waseca. This is a bed and breakfast. If you look in the background, that is the central building where Mr. Kuschel went to middle school. Okay, that is a bed and breakfast. But what is that housing style? See if you can identify that. How about this one? Over by Lau's Meat Market. Look at that. Double story, somewhat symmetrical, has the big porch. What kind of a house style is that? All right. Not far from Barney's in Clear Lake. Has that higher pitched roof. Look at the plaster and has the dark wooden beams in here. What style of house was that one? See if you can remember that particular one. How about this one? A block away from that. There it is. It's right here. Square rooftop. Lots of windows, kind of that natural flow. Kind of back here is Clear Lake. Okay, what kind of house is that? Another one. This was about, it's 2 or 3 blocks from where I live. 2-story house. It has the dormer windows sticking out at the top, has that nice grand entryway, very symmetrical. What type of a house do you see there? All right, here's that house. It looks like one of the others we've talked about because it's symmetrical. Looks like a 2-story until you go around the back. It looks like a 1-story. Remember the unique roof line? High peak here and a long sloping roof in the back. What kind of a house was that one? That one just about gives itself away, doesn't it? Look at these. In this case, are they pentagons or hexagons even? But the equilateral triangles, very structurally sound. Lots of natural light coming in. What kind of house is that? And finally, well, we know what these things are, so kind of a modern version of a classic, but see if you can remember what kind of a house is that style. All right, gives you an idea of these different housing styles. Some you see in our areas, some you don't. Your job now is to fill out your study guide based on what we just looked at, and then there are a few conclusion questions at the end, and one I'm always curious to hear about. What is your favorite style of house? All right. See you next time, guys. Don't forget, these notes will help you prepare for our quiz later this week. See ya.